Good evening. Welcome to the Finding Hope group. Our Hope Sheds Light. I welcome everybody here. Thank you for coming. Hope Sheds Light is a nonprofit organization that focuses on education, awareness, resources for the individual and for the family members. We have this group on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. It's an educational piece for about the first 45 minutes, and then after that we break up into some small groups. On the first and third Tuesday of every month we have our Finding Recovery group, and at that group we focus on a topic, and we share on our experience, on our strength and our hope, and we also have a bereavement group on Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. We have a 24/7 helpline. We have trained recovery coaches on the line. Also, it's peer-to-peer, so there's family members as well. They've all been trained in CCAR and ethical considerations. This group is really formulated to help everybody share their experience, to come together and really support each other. We do have a speaker this evening. His name is Doug Hendricks, and he's from the Center of Advanced Behavioral Care Services, and he'll be speaking this evening on sharing hope and celebrating recovery. It is National Recovery Month, so I welcome Doug. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Good evening. My name is Doug Hendricks. I'm the Outreach Coordinator at Advanced Behavioral Care Services, the center, which is located in Lakewood. It's a dual licensed facility, so we treat mental health and substance use and co-occurring disorders. I've been working in the field of substance use for the past 4 years. I'm also in personal recovery. My clean date is February 28th of 2014. So I've been clean for 5 years, 6 months, 27 days, and 19 hours. Not that anybody's counting, right? So I want to say thank you to Hope Sheds Light for inviting me out to speak, and all the wonderful work that they do in the community. Recently, they did the Hope Walk, which attracted 3,000 people out, which was just amazing. I had a table out there. It was great to see a lot of faces. And on a personal note, my friend Bob Drahos had passed away, and they had a team out there, and they raised the third most money for the walk. And it was truly amazing to see everybody out there come together and support each other through this tough time. So, I do want to thank Heather for reaching out and asking me to come out and share my experience on the topic of sharing hope and celebrating recovery. So when I talk about sharing hope and celebrating recovery, I first want to define what hope is. So could anybody give me a definition on hope? No? Okay. So Google defines hope as a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain outcome. Okay? So having a feeling is something of a positive outcome for myself when I was caught in active addiction was something that eluded me for so many years. And it wasn't until that I met other people in recovery that I really started to believe in myself. Now, I received a lot of misinformation when I was growing up, so I heard a lot of things like, once an addict, always an addict. I heard things like, those people don't get better. So on a deep level, I believe somehow in me that I could never get better, and I didn't have that hope. And that's why it's so important that we come out and we share our stories, and we let other people know that they're not alone through the struggle. So I found myself, just lost, in addiction for a long time. And, it wasn't until I started to come to the rooms of recovery that I met other people who were able to share with me their experience on how they got through it. And that made all the difference in the world to me. So I remember, when I was out there, and I'll tell you a little bit about my story and where I started off and how I found myself working in the field of addiction and what that process and that journey looked like to me. So I grew up in Monmouth County, nice suburban area in Tinton Falls, Sugar Maple Lane, nice area, no drugs, no crime, no nothing like that. My family was a little bit dysfunctional. You know, we had our issues just like a lot of other families. My mother suffered with mental illness. She was bipolar with psychotic features, you know, so that introduced some complications to my childhood. And growing up, I always felt a little bit discontent, you know. I felt like something was off with me, and I didn't exactly know what it was. And around the age of 12, I picked up my first substance. And when I picked up that substance, I felt like I found my solution. I felt like I found my answer that I was missing my whole life. And for me, my disease continued to progress, you know. So I was a good student. I was on a roll. I was in karate. I did gymnastics. I had a pretty good upbringing, you know, but I had this issue with substances. And it was prevalent in my family too. I had an uncle who was using. I'd been exposed to it. I came from an Irish background where we drank a lot. I remember at my uncle's wedding, everybody getting intoxicated and hiding in the closet because they were beating each other up and, you know, being scared and not knowing what to do. You know, so these different things impacted me throughout my life. So as my using progressed, the consequences began to get worse and worse. So I stopped showing up as much for school. I stopped paying attention to my family. I started to go down that downward track. And everybody else could see that I had a problem, except for me. I still thought I had a solution. My mother had sent me to counselors, to therapists, and I went in there with the attitude that I have the solution and you're trying to take it away from me. You know, so I didn't listen and I didn't pay attention. I went to my first recovery meeting when I was 17 years old. I walked in and I said, you know, I didn't pay attention because I wasn't looking for a solution at the time, but I did take note and I noticed that there were people who did find a way out. You know, and that's huge because growing up, I never knew that there were so many people that are in recovery. I was doing my research the other day, and Massachusetts General Hospital is doing a lot of interesting research on recovery. And there's a guy, Dr. Kelly, who works for Harvard Medical Institute, University, and he published a study that showed that 22.35 million individuals has successfully resolved a severe substance use disorder. And this is something I never knew. That's 9.1% of the population of America has at one point had a severe substance use disorder and found a way out. And I never knew this, you know? And no matter how much data and numbers and all this, you know, I can throw at you guys, it didn't really impact me and start to fan my flame of hope until I heard it from somebody's personal story who I got to talk to face to face. So as I continued to grow up, I continued to relapse, and I found myself in worse and worse environments, worse and worse places. I remember being homeless and bouncing around from couch to couch, my family being confused and not knowing, and me still, you know, thinking that, hey, I got the solution. This is what works for me, you know. And it was sad. It was sad, and I didn't have any hope, and I didn't feel I could get out. So when I got to about 23, I wound up committing crimes and you know, being arrested for the things I was doing to support my addiction. And when I got out, I decided that I was going to try to give recovery a good shot, you know. So I went to meetings, I got a sponsor, I bought the literature. I wasn't fully committed, but I said, you know, let me give it a go. And as I did that, I started to get things back in my life, right? So I got a job, I got a girlfriend, I started, you know, moving into a halfway house, you know, started getting some things back in my life, and I started to pull away from meetings because I said, all right, well, I got everything back, now I'm good, you know, and I stopped attending and I stopped going as often as I once did. And within a short period of time, my disease started coming into my head, and it would say, hey, Doug, you can have one drink, you know? And I'm like, no, I can't. And then 2 days later, same thing. Hey, Doug, you can have one drink. And now my recovery supports were gone. I was no longer talking to them. I was surrounded by people who were drinking and engaging in these activities. And after about the fourth or fifth time of my disease coming in my head, I said, well, let me give it a shot. And I had one drink. Everything was okay. I said, wow. I said, 2 days later, I can have one drink and be successful. So 2 days later, I had one drink, which turned into 3. Okay. I said, well, I can have 3 drinks. Nothing's too crazy yet. 2 days later, turned into a 6-pack. And within 2 weeks, I was back in my full-blown addiction, my drug of choice. Everything that I had worked for was gone in a matter of a month. And things got worse. It was probably the worst 2.5 years of my life. I found myself homeless in Asbury Park. I was eating dinner at the rescue mission. I was wandering the streets with different people, living wherever I could. I found out that the girlfriend that I did have from the past was pregnant, and I wanted to get clean, you know? And that's what addiction is. It's when I wake up and I want to get clean, but I can't, you know, because addiction operates on the part of my brain that's associated with survival. So it's almost like drinking water, you know? And it's like, when I wanted to get high, it's like I was dying of thirst, and I would commit these things just to continue that. And I was caught in the grips. So no matter what was going on, what kind of motivation, I was having kids, it's, you know, normally rationally looking at it, it's like, dude, you know, stop using, just don't use, you know, but I couldn't because I was caught in the grips. And after staying out there and waiting to, you know, find out about these kids and what was going on, I decided I'm going to check into the hospital. It was about a week before the kids were born. And I checked in and I went through detox, and I got out the day they were born, and I went to the hospital and I said, this is going to be it. This is going to be the thing that keeps me clean and gets me right. And I'd love to tell you that it was, but it wasn't, you know, because I was that deep and that caught in the grips. And I got out and I had 2 kids, I had twin boys, and I said, I don't know how I'm going to take care of them when I can't take care of myself. And that was a big part of the reason why I started using, was because I didn't have those coping skills to deal with life. And if I didn't have the coping skills to deal with my life, how was I going to have the coping skills to deal with raising 2 children? You know, and I carried around a lot of shame and guilt, knowing that I had 2 kids and I had to get high to take care of them. And it was awful. And you know, I finally got to a point that I was doing things and I was getting arrested, and I finally said, you know, my kids would be better off not knowing who I am. And I went out that day and I took all my money and I bought all the drugs I could, and I said, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow. But I did. And I didn't call out of work, so I no longer had a job. And I began that day calling treatment centers. I had no insurance, I had no money, I was on the streets of Asbury, so I started calling the state-funded programs. And I called, and I got the response, we don't have any beds. Give us 2 weeks, call every day, and we might be able to get you a bed on Hurricane Sandy funding. I said, okay. I woke up the next day, I called. Woke up the next day, I called. And after about 2 weeks of doing this, I finally got a bed in a facility. So I went to treatment for 30 days. And while I was there, I made that decision that I'm not going to use again. No matter what it is, I'm not confused anymore. I know I can't drink, I know I can't do this. Whatever I need to do, I got to give it my all. I got to be 2 feet in and all in this time. So when I got out, I followed the suggestions that they gave me. I went to the local meeting in Toms River on Washington Street at 12 o'clock, and I raised my hand and I said, I just got out of treatment. I have 2 kids. I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. I need rides to meetings. I had no car. And I was blessed enough to live with my mother, who was willing to take me back in at that time. And the 67-year-old man comes up to me and he goes, okay, I'll give you a ride home. I live in the retirement community down the street. And he goes, if you want to go to another meeting, call me at 6:15 in the morning and read me the Just for Today, and I will pick you up and I'll drive you to the 7 a.m. meeting. And I said, cool. So I call him at 6:15 in the morning, I read him the Just for Today, he brings me to the meeting. And I say, okay. And on that ride, he started sharing with me a little bit about his story and how he was able to get out of the grips of addiction and how he was able to build a life that was worth living, build a life that's worth living that he didn't want to escape from with the use of drugs anymore. And at that moment, I started to believe that it might be possible for me, and every day that man would come at 7 o'clock in the morning, and he would come back because I'd call him at 11, and he would take me to the noon meeting. And eventually, he became my sponsor. And that man had sponsored me for my first year in recovery. And he made such an impact on my life, like I can't express it in words, He taught me a lot of things. He taught me about the spiritual principles of recovery, step 1, being honest, step 2, being open-minded, step 3, practicing faith. He's taught me how to make coffee at the meeting. That was my first commitment. I was the coffee guy. And I used that skill to go out and find a job at Dunkin' Donuts, which was my first recovery job. So I started working at Dunkin' Donuts for about 18 months. I got a supervisor position, which was really cool. And at this time, my store manager saw how committed I was to recovery. And, I had gotten a car, from a friend, and it was this Mustang that had 250,000 miles on it, and it was held together by cheetah print duct tape, and it had a Hello Kitty sticker on the back, no airbags, no inspection, but it was a car, and it was able to get me to meetings. And not only did it get me to meetings, but it also got other people to meetings. There's lots of people pulling up in this Mustang with 15s on the front and 20-inch rims on the back, and duct tape. So, at Dunkin' Donuts, the store manager saw me doing all this kind of stuff, right? And she goes, look, my son is really struggling with meth addiction, and he's living in Georgia, and I want him to come up here, and I want him to work at the store. She goes, can you please help him? So I'll do what I can, So he comes, he starts working, and I start driving him to meetings, and same thing, 7 a.m. meeting, 12 o'clock meeting. And after about 3 months, he goes, I want you to sponsor me. And I'm going, I don't know if I can do this, So I talked to my sponsor about it. He said, go ahead, give it a shot. So I did. And the thing about this gentleman is he had difficulty reading. So I used to sit with him at night, and I'd read him the basic text, And I'm so proud to say that this man has gone on and stayed clean, got his family back. He's got 3 kids. And he's living in Georgia now with a wife, and keeps in touch regularly with me. So, that's just one of the many gifts of recovery. So while all this was going on, I had some difficulties at my house, and I had found myself homeless with a year clean. And my store manager said, if you need a place to stay, you're always welcome at my house. And she took me in. And I lived with her for another 6 months. And as this was going on, I made the decision that I started to want to work with addicts who were in recovery. So I called a few of my friends who worked at a facility up in Eatontown, and they got me a job driving the vans. So I went up there, I drove the vans to the meetings, and I would supervise clients, and I would check their bags, and I would do the UAs and the urine screens and this, that, and the other. And I decided, let me see how far I can go with this. So I went back to school, and I enrolled in OCC, college, and I took the CADC classes, the Certified Drug and Alcohol classes. And when I did that, the facility I worked at moved me over to the clinical side. And at that time, I had a position working the front desk and answering the phones and doing all this, that, and the other thing. But I learned a lot about the industry and how it works. And when I got my CADC classes completed, they gave me a counselor internship position, and that was something that was truly awesome. And I started a parenting group for dads who were in the rehab at the time. We always had it for moms, but we didn't have it for dads. And I said, this is something that I can bring. So I started that group, and we met once a week. It was a great group. I now see some of the gentlemen who were in that group at different treatment facilities working, that have gotten their life back together. And it's just, truly amazing feeling to see other people get this and move forward and progress with their life. So in addition to the counselor internship job that I did there, I also worked with the Alumni Program. So the Alumni Program was for clients who had graduated, and we would throw different events for them to come back and celebrate their recovery, as well as showcase some of their talents. We'd have talent shows, so they'd come back and they would play the guitar, or they would do different songs, and it was just a good time, because it's so important for us to continue to celebrate recovery. Because if we're not staying connected.
I just wondered what program you were talking about you worked with.
Yes, at that time I worked at Advanced Health and Education up in Eatontown. So, right, so we would do different, we're in our program, so I'd call them and check in and just say, hey, how's it going? What's going on? Are you making meetings? What are you doing? That kind of thing. And, that provided a lot of spiritual food for me, At that point, they did offer me a position as a client ambassador, and that's something that I truly enjoyed doing. So what that position entailed was for me to go out to different detox centers that we had clients who were supposed to come to treatment afterwards. And if they got to detox and after their first day or second day, they no longer wanted to be there, they would call me, and I would come out and I would sit down with them and I would share my experience of recovery with them in order to try to spark that hope and get them to continue along this process and stay in treatment. And I'm happy to say I was successful 78% of the time. The other 22, they had some choice words for me, and hey, that's okay. But I mean, that was truly a great thing that I got to do. So after working there, I had a little bit of time off. So during that time, I started going back to meetings, back to the meeting that I went to when I first got out of treatment. I chaired that meeting. I handed out key tags at that meeting. I met some fine gentlemen who I picked up in my car and brought to that meeting every day. I wound up sponsoring one of those gentlemen, and proud to say he now has a year clean, and he volunteers for Hope Sheds Light. Hi, Randy. He was supposed to be here tonight, but I'm sure he's going to be watching it on Facebook. And it's just one of those things that I'm just so proud of my sponsees and my guys who do the work in this program, because it is work. It does take right on step work for me. This is the path that I do it, and my guys, they write on steps. We go over step work and we apply the spiritual principles to our life, and our life gets better. And that's how it's worked for me so far. That's how it continues to work for me. Also, during the time when I had a break, my mom came down with cancer. And I was able to show up and drive her to her doctor's appointments, when we didn't know if she was going to make it. And I was able to spend that time clean as actually her son and have those heartfelt conversations that we missed out on for so many years of me being in active addiction. And these are the kind of gifts of recovery that I never expected to get. They told me I was going to have a life beyond my wildest dreams. So when I first came in, I envisioned money, cars, women. But I got relationships, kids, jobs, but it's completely awesome. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't trade it for the world, and it's so awesome. And there's a chapter in the NA Basic Text that talks about more will be revealed. And I've always found that to hold true. The longer I stay in recovery, the more I work these principles, the more I reach out to other gentlemen and meet people in recovery and help. More gets revealed in my life, and I learn more about myself on a daily basis. And I don't ever want to stop growing, And recovery is one of those things, if I'm not consistently engaged in, I start to backtrack. And at least now, I'm aware of that, I see myself slipping, and if I don't see myself slipping, one of my sponsees will see me slipping, my sponsor will see me slipping, and they'll say, hey Doug, get back to meetings, what's going on here? And I can feel it almost. It's almost an intuitive thing at this point. Like I start to feel uncomfortable. I start to feel off, And when that happens, I know I got to check myself before I wreck myself. So I get back to meetings and I do what I got to do. So after my period of time off and everything, I started looking around for another position, and I found the job at Advanced Behavioral Care Services, the center in Lakewood, which is where I'm currently at. And there was a few things about that appealed to me. It deals with clients with mental health issues as well as substance use and co-occurring. And mental health always had a special place in my heart because of the issues I had dealt with my mother. My sister also suffers with mental illness. So growing up with that and being engaged with that, gave me a certain empathy for those clients as well. And working with co-occurring disorders, because it's funny, the longer I stay clean, it's like I start to realize more and more of my mental health things that come up, and different ways to treat them and learn about that kind of stuff. Another cool part of my job is I get to be out on the road, and I get to travel around to a lot of the facilities that either I attended, which I don't know if they know I attended there, but I go there and I meet with clients, doing like a similar thing with the Ambassador Program. And I meet with the discharge planners to help plan an effective discharge treatment from one facility to the next for those clients to ensure that they're getting a good fit and they're placed in appropriate facilities to ensure that they have the best possible outcome. So that's really cool. I get to do awesome events like Hope Sheds Light. I had a table out there that was very cool. I get to go to the NJPN conferences and meet different professionals in the field who always have some kind of great insight or story or reason that they're working in this field, and you get to make some real genuine awesome connections with people. So today, I know this topic was about celebrating recovery as well, and there's a lot of different things that I try to do to stay connected and celebrate recovery, because it's so important, that we show up to these events and we make those connections with the new people coming in and letting them know that it is possible, and not only that, but enjoying life clean. I originally thought when I stopped using, my life was going to be boring, it was going to be dull, there was going to be nothing to do, I'm not going to be able to go here, there, this. But I'll tell you, my life is more full than it's ever been, than it ever was when I was engaged in substance use. I have sober barbecues at my house, I have an air hockey table, we have a fire pit, I bought an acoustic guitar, I taught myself how to play it. So we have guitar circles, so we do a lot of different little things like this that's, it's great and it's a safe place for people to go. And there's a lot of events going on right now. September's Recovery Month, the walk was just, awesome. This weekend, Saturday in Seaside, they have the CFC Rock the Farm Festival, which they have cover bands come out and, they have different activities and stuff like that. So if you're looking for something to do Saturday, that's a sober, clean event. You could check that out. Another thing that I personally enjoy doing is going to NA conventions, because I do go to NA. That's the fellowship that I attend. And they do different things like comedy shows, they have dances, they're for weekends. I like to get a hotel room. A lot of times I have about 12 people sleeping on my floor if I get a hotel room. But,
Nice.
it's cool, man, and you get to really engage with these people and learn about them and, have fun. We do a lot of different cool stuff. So I guess that pretty much sums up, my talk for tonight on sharing hope and celebrating recovery. I hope you got something out of it. If not, it was definitely good for me to go back through my history and take a look at all the different experiences I've had. So that's always cool. And thank you.
Nice, brother.